I think a lot of Gen Z has given up. Many of us are retreating from society in escapism and addiction and an apathy born out of hopelessness and frustration for our futures. And these feelings are born out of many different places, whether it's the economy, the state of the world as a whole, the circumstance of our lives and our families, or just the uniqueness of the modern world and modern problems. From the darkest parts of the internet that we've all been exposed to the perversion and degradation of our culture and the dating market, and this constant unending stream of exposure and stimulation to a world too big to understand, I think a lot of us are simply overwhelmed, feeling especially like things are too far gone, and there's bound to be some sort of collapse right around the corner. As the national debt continues to rise, the political climate becomes more and more radical, and the value of our money begins to fade, I think it's only natural that young people today feel hopeless. When an entire generation begins to look at their futures as being stagnant at best, or worthless and unfulfilling at the worst, then the only real motivation to continue forward and fighting a path within that future is simply to avoid discomfort or suffering in the short term. And so a lot of us have become very short-sighted in our thinking and our motivation. We try not to focus on the direction our world is heading, instead just trying to distract ourselves from it, or hole up in our minds and tune it out, or just do the best we can to continue forward regardless, working jobs, living our lives, the whole time feeling like this train we're all riding is heading towards a wall and we can do nothing about it. Now a lot of you watching this might disagree with me in the specifics. Many of you think I'm being disingenuous or over-exaggerating, but the truth is that things really could take a turn for the worse. Of course, we never like to imagine that. We pretend those days won't come, but in reality, some things are inevitable and unavoidable if nothing is done. The national debt alone is just a small part of this equation, but genuinely, this is an issue that is never going to go away magically. We can pretend it isn't a big deal, or assume we'll figure something out, or brush it off and say it's too far out to know what's going to happen for sure. But genuinely, if we don't do something about our spending here in the US, where I'm from, there will come a point eventually where we couldn't possibly fix our debt spiral, and the interest on that debt will sink our economy until we default, or go to war, or in some way rearrange the entire global economic order for our benefit. Now imagine this knowledge on the mind of someone who's 18, and just became an adult, and is already struggling with the reality of inflation and the value of their money, and has weighing on their minds constantly the thought of just how unlikely it is that the debt problem won't reach critical mass before they retire, or die, so far forward in the future. Then you zoom out and look at all the things which weigh on a young person's mind today, even aside from that, and it becomes no wonder that suicide rates have risen higher than ever. When people feel like they can't find any stability or purpose in their life, it's very natural that you start to end up kind of depressed or hopeless. You see, I don't think that Gen Z is soft, or weak, or spoiled. I think we're misunderstood. I think any generation of young men and women in the world today would have ended up feeling this way. It's the natural, instinctual reaction to a volatile world which seems like it's taking the wrong path. And I think that because so many of us feel so misunderstood and wrongly accused, we just give up on trying to explain. We give up on trying to be advocates for ourselves. We give up on making the world understand where all of this is leading and what we're seeing in our futures, which makes us so scared and overwhelmed. Although I obviously think that stressing about our futures, obsessing and worrying about how things could turn out is unproductive, I also think it's important to understand and really take a look at what role we can play in making our future something better. Because I do think there's hope, in spite of everything. I do think there's some opportunity which is buried within this path, beneath all the risk. And I think that as a generation, if we can come together to understand what our future is looking like, we can do something now to change the timeline and prevent ourselves from being the victims of it. Gen Z is losing faith not solely because our futures look bleak, but because we feel unequipped or unable to do anything about it. We are the youngest class of adults, and so we haven't had the time or the opportunity to amass wealth and power. We don't have a large enough voting base or population to make democratic change, and we aren't unified enough to influence a societal change if we wanted to. So because of this, I think a lot of young people have taken on a fuck it, we ball, I don't even care, we're cooked sort of mentality, indulging in empathy and self-destructive behavior because they feel like there's no reward for their effort. Like even doing their best, they're destined to fail, so they lack the motivation to try in the first place. I've seen a lot of this firsthand, and although I'm not a psychologist, I'd venture to say that the reasons for this are pretty clear. The human being is capable of doing something really incredible, powering through hardship, confronting death, continuing through suffering. But all of this is only possible when that person has a foundation of faith or purpose. When they believe in some way their suffering is worthwhile and contributes to something outside of themselves, which makes it significant, or when they believe that in some way what they're doing contributes to creating the future they desire for themselves, that's when you're really capable of greatness. When a person looks at their future and can't see themselves succeeding no matter how hard they try, because they've lost faith in the external circumstances of their world and those things holding them back which they can't control, then their purpose too becomes weak, and their desire to strive for improvement fades away and just becomes depression and directionlessness. So in a way, I can see why it's happening. I can understand why Gen Z is so hopeless, and I do believe that the reasons are valid and real. But despite that, I think we still have options. I think we still have counterplay, and I think that although we can't necessarily change the direction the world is headed, we can begin now to take steps at an individual level which may influence the world at a more societal level and create real change. The success or failure of any specific movement will come down to the overall strength and capability of its component parts. Although I can't promise any sort of unity or organization anytime soon, I believe that at some point the stressors and circumstances that Gen Z has been subject to will practically necessitate some force of change to work on their behalf. And I think this change will begin at an individual level now with those who are disaffected and desiring a change. For myself personally, I know that I've always been inspired to write books, to make videos, and to give talks that inspire and invoke purpose in people. Because I've stayed aligned with what gives me meaning, as I've grown up to better understand the problems of the world, I've come to better understand the ways that I could help, and the role I might play in improving things. At an individual level, realizing what purpose you have that is worthwhile, independent of outside circumstances, becomes a first step to rapid personal development. As we develop as people, learning more, becoming more humble and capable and hardworking and well-rounded, then we become more formidable as a community, and our collaboration becomes more effective in facilitating genuine change. However bleak the future looks, we can't give in to hopelessness and despair. When you lose faith, you surrender to your lowest instinct. You give up autonomy and power over your life because the obstacles in your way seem too overwhelming. Maybe you can't change the world by yourself, on your own, but that doesn't mean the world can't be changed. It just means that a framework for unity must be constructed, community must be encouraged, and genuine change needs to be fought for, even as an uphill battle, first. In a way, faith is something you give yourself when you realize that without it, you have nothing. Faith doesn't come from examining everything logically and letting doubt creep into your mind. It comes from making a decision to empower yourself with the only perspective which is productive, and hold on to that idea no matter how bad things look, you haven't quite lost. Even as you examine the chessboard in front of you from check, and you realize you're nearly beaten, there's still a best move. There's still something you can do. There's still some reason to give yourself hope and fight like you can win, because nothing else will make a difference. A lot of us act like the future of Gen Z is decided for us, like past generations screwed it all up, and we're the helpless victims of the world we now find ourselves in. Yet from another perspective, we were born into circumstances which were less than ideal for us as a generation. And we, like every generation before us, have the unique opportunity to organize for a change which might improve things for those yet to come. Speaking for myself, I might not understand the world well enough to offer real solutions to complicated problems. Maybe there isn't a ton I can do as a single voice speaking out. But I do see that there are things which we can change, that have been changing, which in a way will carry a ripple which will make confronting the bigger problems just that much more possible. Unity and understanding and humility and open-mindedness and independence from dogmatism and black and white thinking. These are qualities which are transformative for an individual and the world at large. And although human nature can't change, helping to instill yourself and those you care about with a more of a mind for personal progression and philosophical thought for the sake of some larger mission may, along with new technology, a globally connected online world, and a shared vision, at least in the broad strokes, create a force for change which might actually make a difference in the slow and seemingly unending decline of hope in our world. This is something I actually believe, because I'm choosing to have that perspective, because I'm choosing to believe that if I spend my whole life trying to make a difference, that I can make a difference, and that if our whole generation was able to find common ground on something, that we could be the change and the revolution this world is needing. Maybe I'm wrong, and there's something inherent in human nature which is preventing this. But then again, I'd rather be wrong and fighting for something better than correcting being miserable and just watching myself fail through inaction. And to a lot of you listening to this, although my spiel has been long and unfocused, I think you understand. You see where I'm coming from, even if we disagree in the specifics, and you too would like to see a better future, a better path than this one, and a better chance at hope than the one we've been given. Thanks, guys.